request to do a video on how to sharpen a knife with minimal tooling. Might put this on Instagram, might put this on YouTube, I'm not sure yet. But the topic of knife sharpening becomes an interesting one because a lot of people buy a knife and then they don't know how to sharpen it once it gets dull, and they try and they make some mistakes. They have angle matching issues on their stones or whatever method they choose to use. Personally, I use a bunch of different methods. I'll mostly just sharpen on my 2x72 if it's really dull, and then go over to my buffers and I'll hit it with a buffing grit going from like 400 to 30,000. But if you don't have the money invested in the tooling that I've got, or you don't have a sharpening stone, or you're not sure how to use a sharpening stone, there's a very simple way that I've done to kind of shop sharpen, and all you need to have is some sandpaper and a wood block, and then whatever knife you choose. This happens to be a 1960s Randall. So I'm going to do this on a knife that's fairly expensive. I mean, these are going for, I don't know, what, between $500 and $700 depending on the vintage and the fanciness of them. This one was owned by a World War II vet in the 60s and out of New Jersey. The reason I know that is his name is on the backside there, and I looked him up in some databases. But just a 60s Model 5.6, leather handle, aluminum butt, brass guard, got some nice color to it. I really like the classic Randalls. So what you do is you take your knife, you take your sandpaper and your block, you wrap your block of wood with the sandpaper, and then you take your knife, you hold it edge up, and then you kind of eyeball your angle, and this is going to drive some people a little bit nuts. This is not a precise method. This is just a way to sharpen a knife to a decent edge. This isn't super dull to begin with, but it's a little dull and could use a touch-up. I'm using a 220 right now. So what I do is I take my block of wood and make sure that my sandpaper is nice and tightly stretched across it. I like a hardwood. This is a piece of maple, and you can take it and just kind of follow down the edge at the angle that you want, and you just lock your wrist to hold that angle. You do a couple passes on it to make sure that you get the edge geometry where you would like, and you will brush out any light nicks, scuffs, wears, rolls, whatever you have happen to your knife over the time you use it. I did this to a fellow's pocket knife a couple months back when he was taking a class with his son, and it was a very interesting method to show him, as he had not known it was a way to sharpen as well. So once I get that, switch hands, same angle, follow the edge of the knife. I'm not sanding the bevel. I'm not taking any finish off of the edge of the knife or any patina. I'm just going on the actual edge. And then I do a couple strokes. Go up to what I think is adequate. And I check it in the sunlight. If people don't know, checking it in the sunlight, you hold the edge into the sun, you'll see any glinting or edge rolling of your knife edge, and you'll be able to see if it's dull in that particular location. And then you can go back and address it. Right now, this looks pretty good. I'll do a little bit of finish up on this, and then I can go as high as I want. I can do the same process with a 400 grit, 600 grit, 1000 grit, 2000 grit, up as far as I want. And this just lets me get a nice, clean edge on whatever knife I'm working on. You don't have to switch hands. You can even just do it like this and turn your hand the other way and work down the bevel, and keeping it in your dominant hand for the sanding block, in your non-dominant hand for the knife, and then you just make sure that you keep the same angle as you brush that bevel with the sandpaper. And this will give you a decent edge on your knife. Final step that I typically do, I take a piece of leather, just skin side leather. So if anyone's not sure, skin side and flesh side, there's a bit of leather glued to a block of wood, and the flesh side is glued down to the fuzzy side, and then the skin side is the flat, and that's glued with the face up. Then you take that and you can strap your knife with the flesh side without any compound, and that will pull any final burrs off of your edge, and it'll polish that edge up a little bit, and it'll give you a nice sharp finish, and you'll be able to get a pretty easy cut from there. This method works on pretty much any steel that you would want to use it for. it may take a lot longer and with more coarse grit if you're going to try to bring an edge back on something like 3B or 20CV or any of those more wear-resistant steels. Randalls use 01 or 440B, so maybe it's 440C, I don't remember. But this is the carbon Randalls, this is 01, and this is not an extremely hard steel to maintain. You just strap it, sharpen it once in a while when you need to, and then you're back to going it and cutting and doing all the stuff you need to work on. So I've strapped the edge with that piece of wood and leather, and once I'm done with that, I'll check the edge on some paper, see if it holds the way I want. If it's still snagging a little bit and it's not quite as sharp as I'd like, then I'll go to a higher grit and I'll refine that edge some more. But that's just a nice, quick, easy way to get your knife edge back to decent cut, and it's kind of grabbing into my thumbnail, so I know I've got at least a decent edge started there. So, that being said, that is the cheap way to sharpen a knife. You can get those multi-packs of sandpaper, the ones that are like 80, 120, 220, 320, 400 at any hardware store for relatively cheap. You can pack them in your bag when you go hunting, go camping, whatever. Bring a block of wood and just go to your local hardware store, buy some oak, buy some maple, cut it into a block, glue one side with leather on it, and then just use the back side as your sharpening sandpaper backer. You can do it with micarta, G10, whatever you want, as long as it's something that's somewhat hard so that you can get that nice even finish on your edge, and you'll get decent results in the field pretty quickly without having to do a whole lot of work. That being said, this is highly skill dependent, so this may not work for everybody. You have to practice. I wouldn't start practicing on an expensive knife. Start on something cheap, like a $10, Open L or gas station knife so you can get your feel down. But if you don't have sharpening tools, sharpening stones, diamond stones, all these fancy tools to sharpen, you don't have a Tormek, you can do a decent job of field sharpening with some sandpaper and a block of wood, and it doesn't take up much space, it's very lightweight, it's field portable, and once the grit burns out, you toss the grit sandpaper away, you get a new piece, and you're done. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on sharpening supplies. So, shop tip number whatever this is. Enjoy your Thanksgiving break.